Just a reminder, dear viewers. If you're enjoying AnimeKouhai videos, the creator would really appreciate it if you donated to her Patreon page to support her work. She puts a lot of thought, time, and effort into creating Tensura videos, and it's difficult for artists like her to continue putting out content without any support from amazing viewers like you. Check it out if you get a chance.
As I'd suspected, it turned out that Masayuki had lied about mastering his skill. Or maybe this had nothing to do with his skill and it was simply his natural luck? That'd be even more surprising. Leon, for instance, was the polar opposite of Masayuki. Regardless of what he did, it always came off in a bad light. He'd been that way since his early days as a hero, and I suppose it wasn't easy changing one's natural disposition.
Well, I'm sorry that I made this decision for you, but please shine brightly as the beacon of hope to inspire everyone.
I cheered, trying to console him. Thus, the 20,000 members of the volunteer corps were led by Masayuki and fell under the banner of the hero. In the revised organizational structure, the right wing had 52,000 while the left wing had 50,000. Benimaru was listed at the top. Beneath him were the various corps commanders. In total, we had more than 100,000 troops, but even so, it was up in the air whether they could hold a candle to the Imperial Army. But there was no need to panic, our preparations were progressing steadily. As a reserve force, there were 150,000 soldiers in the Western Reserve. Plus, each country also reported that they were making preparations to ready reinforcements from among their own knights. An allied Western force would be organized to be the very last line of defense. The number of this army would probably come out to no less than 200,000, and we would be relying on them if the worst comes to pass. We were scraping together as many mercenaries and aid from each country as possible. It was a lot, or pitifully little, depending on how you looked at it. I heard that Testarossa had threatened them at the council meeting, which was why they were cooperating. Either way, if we lose, then they would undeniably be the next targets, so they had to lend their support. Well, either way those forces would remain in place until our defeat became evident. We had the home field advantage. We also had Veldora's presence nearby and the cooperation of demon lords like Ruminas and Leon. Milam also promised to help us out. Carrion said that his Beastmaster's Warrior Alliance would always be prepared to deploy. And as my personal trump card, the black numbers under Diablo were at the ready. Since I gave Benimaru command of the entire army, ostensibly I wasn't directly in control of a single unit. That was how we ultimately decided things, but it wasn't the whole truth. The black numbers would only accept orders from Diablo and the Demoness Trio, who were his subordinates. It was a unit completely independent of Benimaru's command. This was the full picture. We did not take into account how Yuki would act.
War, huh?
I muttered quietly in my room. Did the Empire really want to annex the Western nations? Guy had mentioned the word game. There seemed to be some kind of connection, and perhaps the Empire had some disturbing ulterior motive. But even if that were the case,
I don't care who comes, if they try to mess with our paradise, we'll crush them.
This was what I genuinely felt from the very depths of my heart. I'm not going to make the same mistake again. I am a demon lord. I couldn't afford to misjudge what my priorities truly were. Meanwhile, within the Eastern Empire, preparations for the war were moving smoothly forward, just like in Tempest. Or rather, the Empire's investment in the matter was orders of magnitude greater in scale and time, so immense that the two could not even begin to compare. They had planned meticulously for a long time, all for a major offensive. Soon enough, the Empire was about to awake from its slumber. The days before their ferocious advance steadily counted down.
Volume 12, Chapter 2.1, The Internal Affairs of the Empire.
The Eastern Empire, one of the oldest nations in the world. It was more formally known as the Nazca Namrium Ulmeria United Eastern Empire. The history of the empire was said to be ancient, and that its foundations were laid out by a nation as far back as 2,000 years ago. The long-standing minor kingdom of Nazca gradually absorbed the large nations of the magic kingdom of Namrium and the Eastern Union of Ulmeria, thus giving birth to the empire known today. Its overwhelming military power was its backbone. During the past 2,000 years, under the reign of the uniting emperor Rudra Nam ul Nazca, the empire grew immensely powerful, quashing any signs of rebellion from the nations they had absorbed. It acted as the hegemonic power, dominating these states. This was the truth behind the Nazca Namrium Ulmeria United Eastern Empire, commonly referred to as the Eastern Empire. The emperor could be described as an absolutist and was born from a pure bloodline of overlords who all passed down the name Rudra. Regardless of the truth of this matter, the emperor advocated absolute meritocracy, and firmly stood by it. Thus, the core philosophy shaping the military was, power is everything, and a special system was established that allowed a person to climb the ranks, if they had the strength to. There was a rumor going around among the citizens of the empire, pertaining to the reason why they had yet to begin their invasion of the Great Jura Forest. The reason many believed, the empire had not finished preparing. Around 350 years ago, an attempt to subdue the storm dragon Veldora failed, and a city was destroyed in the process. Those who had provoked the capricious dragon had no time to regret it, as they shared the same fate as that city. It had been the largest city of the empire at the time, boasting a population over 100,000, and was a fortress city adjacent to the eastern side of the Great Jura Forest. It had been built over 100 years to serve as a bridgehead to invade the forest. They had hoped to turn the city into a military stronghold in order to break through the forest and further expand the empire's territories. Driven by this ambition, the military at the time began to draft an assault plan. They had to cross the Great Jura Forest. They had spent the past century longing for this opportunity. They were already a prosperous nation, and so there was only one reason why they hoped to expand their territories further. It was their emperor's wish. There was no other reason, and none of the empire's citizens had any complaints. The plan proceeded smoothly, and as the empire's army gradually accumulated power, they were ready to display their military prowess. Soon enough, they were given orders to invade the forest in the name of the emperor. However, all plans for the invasion were thwarted by the foolish idea of a certain troop captain. Since we are here, we might as well subjugate the ruler of the Great Jura Forest too. It's just a giant lizard, after all, it doesn't stand a chance against us. This hubris led to their ultimate downfall. As for what exactly they had done, it was not accurately recorded. After all, the people in charge of keeping records as well as the places holding said records were all turned to dust. The empire's wish and the emperor's ambition were reduced to ashes. Time passed, and in the present day, the empire found itself in a state of limbo. They had finally recovered from Veldora's blow, however, the emperor had yet to give his permission to invade. Any act of invasion towards the Great Jura Forest was strictly prohibited. After 350 years, they had rebuilt their power once more, waiting for the right opportunity to strike. Then, let us have a look at the political structure of the empire. Within the empire, the political department and the military department were the left and right hands of the emperor. He had both political dominance and military command, holding absolute authority. Within the political department, the nobles within the empire were organized into the House of Peers and enjoyed extraordinary authority. Yet it was merely superficial. In reality, these nobles had no actual decision-making power. They merely enjoyed the honor and privilege, while staying beholden to the emperor's will. At most, they were just bureaucrats. The power of the nobles was hereditary, and they could become senators without being elected. Even if they were extremely ambitious, they would never have enough power to achieve their dream. All of the territories of the empire belonged to the emperor. The nobles were merely leased the land for temporary management. The ones supporting the nobles were highly educated officials. It was these officials who handled all the planning. They were directly supported by the emperor, since these officials had all sworn allegiance to him. Up next is the military department. The supreme decision-making power of the military did not belong to the nation, but the emperor. All of the empire's military power was centered on the emperor. This also applied to the nations that had been annexed by the empire. All of their territories were claimed, and their land now became the property of the emperor. So were the defense troops deployed there, where they were considered as a generous gift from the emperor. This policy was effective in completely eliminating any form of rebellion in the provinces. The overwhelming difference in national power was the key to its success. The empire would accept the surrender of other nations, but it was the equivalent of forfeiting all of their rights. If one of them rejected those terms and launched a rebellion, they would be met with a bloody purge. The empire did this to deter even the thought of insurrection, cutting off the very roots of rebellion. In that manner, the empire managed to maintain order. On the one hand, the fear of their tyranny, and on the other, ensuring the livelihoods of its loyal subjects, the quintessential carrot and stick policy. Through this, the empire managed to maintain peace and prosperity with its complete authoritarian control. It was normally impossible for an empire of this scale to be ruled by a single person. Yet even so, throughout its 2 millennia of history, the dominance of the emperor had never been shaken. Generation after generation, the emperor's authority never faded. By all accounts, it was an extraordinary feat. If all of this truly was the emperor's own doing, he was a being that transcended the mortal realm. Moving on, let us have a look at the military strength of the empire. The structure of their military could be roughly divided into 3 major corps. The Armored Corps, an army modified by armored technicians consisting of mainly mechanized troops. They were the modernized armed corps, and their arsenal included heavy weaponry, such as tanks. They symbolized the Empire's technology. The Magic Beast Corps, an army consisting of all sorts of magic beasts captured by the Empire from various regions across the world, within their domain and otherwise. The Corps manipulated the magic beasts and wielded their power. They symbolized the Empire's strength. The Mixed Corps, a cesspool where non-standard mechanized troops and uncontrollable, ferocious magic beasts were dumped, loosely resembling an army. This corps was considered to be too reliant on individual strength and unsuited for organized group action. However, their total strength was unknown, and if united, could potentially pose a tremendous threat. They symbolized the Empire's heart, though this heart was not mature enough yet. Unlike the Western nations, which focused its military power on swords and magic, the Empire was pioneering a new era with magic and science. The existence of Otherworlders played a major role in the growth of the Empire's military power. Someone had seen potential in the knowledge brought from the Otherworlds, an archmage, one who had lived for a long time within the palace, named Gadra. Despite his elderly appearance, the man was extremely energetic. He craved knowledge of all kinds, even outside the field of magic. He was also very fond of hearing the stories told by people from other worlds. That was how he learned that there were many other nations in other worlds as well. Unlike this world, the residents of these other worlds spoke different languages and had different ideologies. Yet, even then, they were able to overcome their differences and coexist. He also learned that other worlds had no magic, yet their civilizations were highly developed and completely different to this world's. Gadra had lived for a long time. Every time his life was about to come to an end, he would undergo the secret ritual he invented, the mystic art of reincarnation, in order to rewind his lifespan. It was this ability that allowed him to study Otherworlders over many lifetimes. He amassed a wealth of knowledge, including several Otherworld languages. In addition, whenever Otherworlders arrived in this world, he would send his subjects to ensure that they were under his personal protection. Magical beasts weren't the only thing the Empire was collecting. Gadra also appealed to the Emperor on the practical use of Otherworlders and was given the permission to do as he wished with them. Some of these Otherworlders possessed unusual abilities, and some possessed vast knowledge. The Otherworlders arriving at the borders of the Empire received special treatment, and far more had gathered there than any other nation. As a result, their cultures and traditions were seen across the Empire.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shout out to the new members of AnimeKouhai supporters: Hammami, Sanketh Chelu, T-Bush, 216 Kuko. Thank you so much for helping out. Shout out to the commenters: Wabalabadabdub, Rembaru, Chadvota, Anubis JY, A Tempest, and last but not least, shout out to Linglong Pagoda. I'll see you guys in the next video.